Aha, we are live. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us in your lunch break. My name is Simon Hearn, and I'm a co-chair of the DeltaV conference, which is coming up in London, and there's a really big sign in front of you to tell you when it is. The DeltaV conference is all about web performance, and today we've been lucky enough to get 4 of our speakers to join us for a fireside chat about all the big performance topics of 2018. Before we get started though, a bit of housekeeping. You've signed into any meeting, so well done, first challenge passed. Secondly, there are 2 little buttons up there, which give you the option to ask a question. And please ask as we go along, and we'll do a Q&A session at the end. There's also an emoji, and you may see some emojis flying across the screen, and that just gives us a bit of indication as to whether you're bored or really bored, and how quickly we should skip on from that question. So, without further ado, let's introduce our panel. For each of us, I'd like us to introduce who we are, what we do, and what's your favorite HTML tag. So if we start with Léonie.
My name's Léonie Watson. I'm Director of Developer Communications at the Paciello Group, known as TPG. My area is digital web accessibility. Favorite HTML element, I'm going to have to go for the button element, just because it's so often forgotten, and yet it gives us so much goodness, all that keyboard focus and interaction that the browser gives us for free, so we don't have to do it as developers, all the accessibility and semantic information we get as users. It's an awesome little element, and we should use it more.
What's wrong with div and JavaScript? Gosh. I think we all know the answer to that question. Cool, thank you, Léonie. Harry.
Hey, so thanks for having me. I'm Harry. I'm a consultant web developer. My focus has shifted from the last couple of years. It was a major focus on large-scale CSS architecture. But for the last couple of years, I've been helping typically fairly large clients just service their customers better through web performance. So faster websites, faster, better experiences, more resilient and sort of reliable experiences. And my favorite element, I'm glad I got asked this one fairly early, because I'm going to steal the A element, right? It's got to be the anchor. There wouldn't be a web without the anchor element. So for me, it's all about that. It's what connects all the dots. So the A element from me.
And the A element was in the very original first HTML spec.
Exactly.
It's linking things together. That's the whole point of the language.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's me.
Sorry, Laura and Tobias. Harry's taking the best one. Laura, you're too cool to have a Twitter handle. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Laura Sheridan. I'm the Senior Business Process Manager at Janie Williams. I work within the Customer Insight team, which sits within marketing, and my role predominantly is the link between IT and marketing. In the last 18 months, I've driven web performance throughout the business and taken it from an IT metric to a company-wide metric. HTML, well, for me, anything that provides in-depth analytics, which is pretty much everything, coming from the customer insight team, data is power. So, anything that we can use for that.
But not AMP analytics. Sorry, we won't get there yet. Thank you very much. Tobias.
Hey, my name is Tobias Baldauf. I'm the tech domain lead for the landing domain at Trivago. You might know Trivago from the fact that we plastered all of the London Underground with the same boring ad all over again and again and again until people hated us. The landing domain describes also the performance and the user experience of people coming to Trivago. So I am very much interested in the web performance of Trivago. And that also, like Laura already described, brings me into contact with marketing team and other teams inside Trivago, and gives me the responsibility of monitoring things and making things better. That's me. Oh yeah, my favorite HTML tag. The stuff in the header count, because I think I'm completely in love with link rel preconnect right now.
Oh yeah. The link tag is something or the link element is something that's grown massively over the last couple of years. It's a shame that pre-render went away, because that was a really good way to hack your second visit performance. I think it's really great that we've got so much IT marketing synergy going on in the panel, because it was only a few years ago that you wouldn't have heard of marketing and IT working together. I remember working with a client that said, oh, marketing have told us that tomorrow they're doing our biggest marketing campaign of the year, and apparently we have to keep the website up. Laura's laughing because it's never happened at N Brown Group or JD Williams. Good, let's move on. So when we first started thinking of the idea for DeltaV Conf, I think it was called Perfops Days back then, a year and a half ago. One of the biggest factors in the way we wanted to curate the conference was to help define what web performance means. Because it started off maybe in 2007 with Steve Souders writing his book, High Performance Websites. But it's evolved a lot since then, and a lot of different parts of different companies use the term interchangeably for site speed or for business process performance. So my first question to the panel is, what does web performance mean to you? I'll let you fight for the first person to answer.
I'll take it. It means a bunch of different things to me, depending on what mood I'm in or what hat I'm wearing. For me personally, it means challenges. It means sort of like just fascinating, intricate, forensic, really detailed bits of work. So for me personally, directly, it's about kind of just challenging and very intricate, detailed work. You can always make things a tiny bit faster, but broader than that, it comes down to like resilience. So not is something fast or slow, it's just how well can this thing hold up full stop. Another thing that I've noticed, especially in the last few years working with clients, is it's a very business-facing thing, much more than like the typical work that a web developer might do. So for me, it's a really good way of bridging the gap between engineering and business. So for me, it's much more of a holistic thing than just getting your head stuck into dev tools for 3 days straight. You know, it's a very holistic kind of thing that I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. It's taking me way closer to business concerns, which for me is great.
And it feels like we're still teaching the business about what we think web performance is, which means there's so much new ground to cover and so many enlightened faces when you describe how the impact of, and I think it was Tammy Evans with Radware did some research on variable performance user experiences. And if something is slow but consistent, people react better than something that's fast sometimes and slow other times. So that resilience bit is something that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Cool. Laura, I imagine...
I'll follow on as well from Harry and saying, you know, exactly what he's saying about bringing it into the business as well. For me, web performance is just another tool for conversion rate optimization. And that's really what I've led with for the past 18 months, to get the whole of marketing on board with what it is and why it's so important to them, and that it is a business-wide metric. From design to IT to creative, everyone can have an impact on it. And, you know, coming from an analytical background as well, numbers tell a story. So web performance allows us to have that extra complexity of like the why in the collaboration with other web analytics tools that we're using. And, you know, particularly for a retail business where I'm coming from, it boils down to how quickly does your site load, and that directly impacts your consumers. We're all consumers, aren't we? We know that if a site's loading slow, then it does impact your conversion rate. So, yeah, that's what it means to me.
I think for me, it's about bringing two complex systems together on a level performance platform. So both the technologies that we create and human beings are complex systems, and it's ultimately human capability or our expectations of our performance that govern whether we find the performance of our technology acceptable or not. So I think, yeah, for me, it's about bringing those two things together to kind of an agreed point where the performance of the technology meets the expectations of the performance of the human in whatever context they may be in at the time and tasks they're trying to accomplish.
That's a really nice viewpoint, especially as people, we want to consume more and more. So our expectations are always changing. And I don't think perhaps our systems change as rapidly as they need to keep up with our expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We should all go back to green screens, green screen terminals. They were really fast. Like the lowest latency input you'll ever get.
I can just second what Léonie just said. For me, web performance at least started as a as a user experience journey, actually. I wanted to make sure that whatever client I was working for, that the goal of the user never gets lost, that they have a quick way to access the necessary information for a site that also involves the path, the information architecture, everything. So this is how I got started with the whole thing, and that still rings true to in my head right now, that at the end of the day, I want to make sure that people get the information that they need fast in whichever situation they're in. So especially right now, we're dealing with a lot of emerging markets with very heterogeneous network conditions, interesting devices. So this is something where we still want to make sure that we deliver that value to the user. In Trivago, you hear a lot about user value in the last couple of months. So it's less for me about specific metrics and specific tooling. It's more for me about, does the user get the satisfaction quickly from using our site? That's it. The human factor is what keeps me interested.
And how do you measure that? That's the tough one.
Net promoter score. Boom. If I can actually just piggyback that bit, I think that's a really interesting. So I work as a consultant. I work with companies, and nearly all of my discussions center around this very westernized, very capitalist worldview of, hey, a fast website's going to make you more money. But for the last year, I've kind of been focusing a lot on these emerging markets, purely from a research standpoint. And I think there's a moral side to web performance. You know, you've got people on super expensive data plans, and a lot of what we do is just irresponsible. You know, sending twice as many kilobytes for tracking scripts as you do for meaningful content. Sleazy things we do just tracking people around the web. And I think there's a genuine moral side to web performance that I kind of keep that for me a lot. That's kind of like makes me feel good. But I do think it's something that more businesses need to focus on because well, it's pretty pertinent right now. There's a lot of sort of controversy around this kind of stuff. But I think there's also a hugely moral and ethical side to web performance. You know, some people don't have the infrastructure that we have. Some people don't have the data plans that we can so readily afford. And I think that's a harder sell to businesses because obviously it's very disconnected from a lot of the companies I would work with. But there's no reason people in remote parts of emerging markets don't want the exact same content that we take for granted.
Yeah, and it feels kind of like the browser vendors are pushing that rather than website developers.
Currently, yeah.
The advertising company that owns a web browser, they have introduced service workers so we can cache things, we can have better control over cache. They've introduced the data saver client hint, so the client can tell the server that I don't want these massive images. And they've also introduced accelerated mobile pages, although that's not a Google project officially. So are any of these going to be the golden bullet or silver bullet that saves the web for emerging markets? Big question.
I think things like AMP, etc., they're a solution for a symptom, right? They're patching over. I think businesses have finally realized, oh, we need fast websites, and we just spent 10 years building slow ones. We're not going to spend the next 5 years building fast ones again. Let's patch over the problem. And I think AMP it speaks to business owners way more than it speaks to developers in my experience. And I think developers want to build fast websites. No developer really wants to spend a few sprints converting all their HTML to AMP HTML. They'd rather be empowered to build a fast website. So I don't think they're a silver bullet. I think they're a bit of almost a cry for help or at least a stopgap. I would like to see people do the work properly, but selling that into businesses is way more costly than stick AMP on there.
Yeah, or pay someone to do that for you.
Yeah.
Laura, has there been any push to get AMP into any of the J.D. Williams properties, or hasn't that come to your side of e-commerce?
No, there hasn't actually. I mean, I'd have to say that I still feel like we are in our infancy with web performance, even though it's been a business focus for the last 18 months. But we are starting, we hit all the low-hanging fruit to start with. So now we're at a stage where we're really going to try and embed it and take the technology further. We're on a big transformation project in terms of moving all of our websites to a new web platform. So this is perfect timing for us. So our UX and dev director is very keen on these kind of things. So I'm sure in the future we will be looking at that.
Yeah, any new technology that promises great things has to come up. What about at Trivago, Tobias? Any hint of AMP?
No hint of AMP, but I'm glad. What we did adopt strongly, and I think you probably saw that is Google I/O, is the PWA, so the service worker that you mentioned. We strongly believe in the web as a platform for everybody, and I think the PWA and service worker are the right way to go about this. So to answer your question about a silver bullet, I don't think there is one. It's the constant pendulum movement of business requirements versus engineering requirements and going back and forth and iterating upon this. So I don't think anybody will ever come up with a silver performance bullet. Unless maybe we can finally leverage quantum entanglement for data transmissions. But until that is done, I think we're stuck with the speed of light, or a third of the speed of light. So I think there's always going to be a struggle.
That sounds like a good weekend project.
Yeah.
I think actually, if there was to get, I think if I was to get really sort of philosophical and almost pretentious, I reckon the biggest magic bullet would be just restraint. Like if businesses just were a bit more considered in what they did, what they, just it starts with business decisions. I think that's where solving a problem that far back, it's not going to be a magic bullet, it's not going to be a silver bullet, but I think that's way more effective than just sticking AMP on after the fact.
Yeah, it's enforcing the rules.
And restraint, exactly. Restraint is one of the biggest things I go through with clients. Like, you probably don't need it. You'll know when you do need it. If you think you need, just don't do it. Avoid X, Y, and Z. Avoid as much as you can for as long as you can, and it's generally going to be a safer path to go down.
Keep it simple seems like a good mantra for performance. It's certainly there for experience, usability, accessibility, all of those things. So yeah, I agree completely.
Exactly.
Yeah, it used to be that companies or businesses would make slow websites because they wanted rich media. So they'd throw on a YouTube plugin and they'd throw on really rich images, and then they'd load all 16 images in the carousel at the same time, so you don't get the first one until they've all downloaded. It seems
I was working.
Sure.
Apologies, I spoke straight over you then, sorry.
Go for it. You've probably got more interesting things to say.
I've got a really interesting anecdote, I guess, with a client I worked with. Their entire, all the marketing bods were like, we want this, we've paid for this video, we spent money on this video, we want it on the homepage. It's like a 19 meg video. And what business owners or website owners, they hate that stuff on everyone else's website. You hate seeing carousels, but when it's your website, you want a carousel and there, you want a video. Every single person inside this company, if they needed to go to their own website, they would always go to the contact page first to avoid having to hit the home page at all, because they knew their own video on their own website was such a resource-intensive bit of dead weight that if they wanted to go to their own website, they would always avoid the homepage. And I was like, that is evidence enough that you need to rip this video off. Like, no, we like it. Like, you don't. You keep avoiding it on purpose. Yeah. And for me, it's just one of those things where you don't need to hire me to come in and help you. Just check what you're doing yourselves. It's that was quite telling.
Sometimes it's just an outsider's.
I agree with Harry entirely. I think governance is really important in the business, whether that's from tagging to content and to image size. You need a governance piece in place because, exactly like Harry's saying, it comes down to that.
So what's your governance piece at JD Williams?
And we've got a number of things in place. So we've got a tag governance, which now means that anything that goes on the site has to go through stringent audit, which avoids, shall we say, previous situations where any man and his dog could put tags on the site with no necessary business benefit, which obviously, you end up with tags from 3 years ago that the person left and we've no idea what they are. So it's a cleansing and audit process. But also now we've got that in place to keep some ownership on it. We have good governance in terms of our content designers as well. So we have budgets of expected image sizes, etc., etc. Similarly with the marketing team, there's general we don't put governance in place, but there's been a massive education piece of carousels are pants, and don't use them as much. You know, we don't need 25 slots on the homepage for content when 2 could do a great job. And so, you know, those kinds of things. So it's been a cross between governance and education. And it's an ongoing process, absolutely.
Always, yeah.
Laura, let me ask you a question. Does that mean you have somebody who provides mentoring and visualization of performance data inside the marketing department, or do you provide these insights to the marketing department? All right.
Yeah. I am generally kind of the web performance guru for the marketing department, and that's everything from you know, sitting with the senior management team on a regular basis, disseminating information, working really closely with the brand and content team, and managing a cross-functional working group which brings marketing, design, IT together to ensure that everyone is working on the same process.
That sounds so cool. And I like the way you introduced yourself earlier as JD Williams being in their infancy on the performance journey. But that sounds like the most robust governance policy and strategy, and having working groups. I think that it sounds incredible. Look forward to hearing you talk about it.
Because I can just see there's so much more benefit. You know, we can go so much further. So yeah, you know, we've probably done quite a bit. You can never do enough.
Yeah.
I think there's some. Sorry, go on.
Please, Léonie, after you.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think Laura touched on a really interesting point there, in as much as there's a communication piece involved here too, helping different teams understand the ramifications of the choices they make. So, you know, Harry's video on the homepage, you know, looks brilliant. I'm sure the video was, you know, spectacularly impressive and all of those things, but helping the marketing team understand the implications of that choice in terms of, you know, user impact, performance impact, because, you know, someone who is, you know, whose profession is, say, you know, marketing, may not have all the information about usability performance. So I think helping different teams understand choices is a really key part of getting this together.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I focus on most is managing sort of, to an extent, egos, I guess, but also managing people's just feelings, right? You've got a marketing team who it's their job to do the things that developers keep telling them is a bad thing. There's always this us versus them, and you can't go into a meeting and say, oh, your tag manager's rubbish and this video is crap and all this, because that's the quickest way to just further divide those two teams. So what I tend to do is go into these things like ask, don't tell, always ask, never tell. Hey, can you just give me like a 2-hour workshop on how Google Tag Manager works? And get the marketing team excited to show you that, oh, we do this, and we can measure this by doing that. And then at least as an engineer, you understand, okay, that is providing business value. So it's not my job to sit there and say, oh, this is terrible. So yeah, ask, don't tell. Never tell the marketing department, we need to get rid of this, or this video is terrible. Inquire, hey, how come we've got this video? Do we measure its impact? Have we A/B tested with and without? Have we done this? Because the marketing team might be like, we haven't, that's a good idea, we should. Whereas if you just go in and say, we need to remove this video, all you're going to get in response is, well, we paid 10 grand for that, so we're not getting rid of it. And conversely, the marketing department need to know to do the same. Hey, we're thinking of using this third-party chat provider, but can you just do a quick audit of its kind of performance impact? And the engineering team would be like, absolutely, we'll schedule that in this afternoon, we'll take a quick look, and we can give you a go-ahead or not. And I think it's that kind of thing. You've really, really, really got to be very careful and mindful of people's, well, feelings sounds a bit too wishy-washy, but it's like, if you're going to be effectively critiquing someone's entire role within the organization, you have to tread carefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Socrates would be proud.
That touches nicely on the subject that Simon already mentioned. That how do we monitor these things? How do we measure performance? Because at the end of the day, we need to have a common basis of understanding. So the marketing department often has different KPIs from engineering. So how do you communicate these two different worlds to each other? And one large benefit, one large boon that we found is bringing RAM metrics into our business KPIs. so that the product managers have a chance to immediately identify the impact of new features, like also introducing new tags.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most passive-aggressive performance collaboration I saw was at a company where they put a speed curve front-end performance dashboard at the front of the marketing office. And once you see a line, you want to follow it, right? And you want to know that up is bad and down is good. And when it goes down, you're happy. And when it's bad, everyone panics. So they went into the development manager and said, why has it gone up by 1 second? And they said, well, this is that image you've just added, or this video that you've just added to the homepage. And suddenly they took ownership of that metric because they realized that they had direct control or direct influence over the user experience.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
I think that's something that's been said a couple of times now. You can't fix something if you don't know what's wrong.
Absolutely.
So RUM is an interesting challenge. What is the best metric to use to measure performance through real user monitoring, or RUM?
Custom metrics, in my opinion. There's no one size fits all. So time to first search result, whatever it may be, time to first search result, time to how long did it take to actually get something into a cart, that kind of stuff.
I think the BBC News
changes per.
BBC News had 250 performance metrics that they tracked, and then they whittled it away to 2, and that was time to first headline and time to first scroll. So the headline is rendered so the customer can see something, and then scroll, because the first thing you do when you get to a news article is skip the headline and the hero image and then go to the text. So you wouldn't scroll until you could see how far you needed to scroll.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a nice one.
I think time to first interaction is becoming a first-party stat in a lot of tools now, whether that's click or scroll or type. I think that's really important. And it's something that's general.
I agree.
So what metrics do you use at Trivago for the landing domain?
So I think we have it's not really a policy, it's more of a mentality of measure everything, but don't let your decisions be guided by everything. We ingest all the metrics that we can get. We use them for discovery of issues. So if we want to find out how long has something been affecting which percentage of our users, so we track all the standard RUM metrics with a couple of different tools. However, we also, for actually making our decisions, like Harry already mentioned, we have custom metrics in place. Because one thing that RUM out of the box does not handle well are SPAs. So single page applications, especially with custom frameworks in place. So you need to kind of identify what's the metric I'm looking for here, like you just mentioned from the BBC. So we measure everything to be able to debug stuff, but we let our decisions be guided by a defined set of custom metrics.
That's a really nice idea. Yeah, as he said, graph everything, even if it's not moving, because one day it might move.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about performance. We've got Léonie here, whose focus is on accessibility. And I think oftentimes accessibility and performance have been seen as the nice to haves when you're developing a new web product. Is there anything we can do to help both of them? Does making a website faster make it more accessible? Or should we change our definition of accessible and fast?
I think there is a certain amount that you can do in terms of development that will improve certainly accessibility and quite possibly performance along with it. Tobias just mentioned single page applications and frameworks, and when handled badly, both of those things can mean quite a performance hit, either because we're making more HTTPS calls, or because we're changing massive chunks of the DOM pretty regularly. From the accessibility point of view, the interesting angle is that if someone's using an assistive technology, particularly a screen reader, being aware that the browser is actually having to do a lot more work than it customarily does is really important. So a browser typically will render the page, it'll create the DOM. But if an assistive technology is present, then it does a bunch of extra stuff like create an accessibility tree. That's what the screen reader or assistive technology interacts with, and then the AT itself goes away, and quite often builds up its own representation of the page. So there's a lot more that has to happen before we get to, first interaction. In some browsers and on some large web pages, seriously large ones, there's an additional delay of maybe 3 or 4 seconds a lot of the time. And I think Laura made the point much earlier, about conversion rates and the impact that performance can have on that. The effect is basically that with steroids quite often when you associate, an assistive technology into the equation.
But it's really hard to measure that delay. In fact, it's impossible, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was just thinking earlier when I think, Tobias mentioned, using sort of, first interaction as the metric. It's possible that done well and with some sort of browser and AT variations, first key press would give us at least a guiding metric, if not a very specific one, perhaps. But yes, it is a difficult one to measure.
I like that idea. Yeah, first interaction captures a little bit more than meets the eye.
It does. Yeah.
Awesome.
The tricky bit we've got with that is that at the moment it's not really possible to identify that an AT is running.
Yeah.
And there are actually some pretty serious privacy considerations in heading down the path of being able to identify that an AT is running. So it's not a simple question, unfortunately.
No.
That's fascinating insights, because I have to hold my hands up and say that's not something I've never been aware of, that further implication, which is entirely my fault. But knowing that implication exists now makes you think, oh, geez, have I really been? I thought I've been doing a good job all this time, but maybe there's even more I should have been doing that I've not even been focusing on.
Yeah, it's kind of never ending.
That's why it's fun, right? That's why it's fun.
Yeah,
keeps us out of mischief.
Speaking of fun, has everyone finished their talk preparation for DeltaV?
Ask me a different question.
Uh-huh.
All written and rehearsed, I'm sure. I think we've covered almost everything we wanted to go through.
I was just going to say, from my point of view, we've actually this week pulled together our kind of final outline. So we are just doing some tweaks and making it look pretty. But yeah, we're super excited about it. I'm co-presenting with one of our IT managers, so we're showing how business and IT work together on web performance.
That's going to be so
cool.
Shall everyone else give you a quick, brief sales pitch of what you're talking about? That'd be really interesting. Tobias, what are you talking about?
Oh God, dear Lord. All right. Okay. What am I talking about? I'm going to be talking about how we handle web performance at Trivago, how we make sure that everybody is part of the equation, that it's not a departmental issue or even a team issue, but that everybody helps own performance. And that, like Léonie just pointed out, that features like accessibility and performance can actually go hand in hand and empower each other as well. And I'm going to tell a story of how this goes by telling how we switched CDNs. I'm doing that because this is just something that my team facilitated. So it's the story that came to my mind to use as a vehicle to describe how things work at Trivago. Also a little bit about the culture of how we handle such projects, because we don't do traditional Scrum or waterfall or anything. We follow today it's been called anarchic process. I really like it. So yeah, I'm kind of dropping the veil of how everything works in terms of web performance engineering. I kind of hope that this is going to be inspiring to people.
Cool. Sounds really good. Harry, you're talking about my favorite topic.
Yeah. Third parties. Strap yourselves in. No, it's going to be. I've only got 30 minutes, I believe, and I could do like a full day workshop on third parties. But yeah, so it'll start with fairly objective things. Here's how you do a sweep of a sort of a website to find out what third parties are being used. How can we identify any duplicate services? How can we just quickly gather the impact of each of those services? How do we stress test what happens if one of those services has got network delays or if it's got a full-on outage? How can we defend against that? But I think what I'm keen to focus more on, because the objective stuff is you learn it once, you can do it over and over again. I'm wanting to discuss, the discussions that I would have with the business about that kind of stuff. As I mentioned in one of my previous answers, it's way more political than a lot of other things might be. So how do you gently broach a subject of, hey, everything you've done for the last 2 years has made the website slow. Can we have a chat about that? How do you sort of broach those topics and just kind of give people a framework of how they should approach that and start working a bit more sort of joined up to get it solved?
The point of view of an external consultant will be really valuable there, because everything that we have to manage within a business is twice as important for you, I guess.
But also I got the wonderful benefit of I've never had to deal with any of that company's deadlines, any of their internal struggles. So I've got a huge privilege there, as I just swoop in, I focus on one thing for like a week, 6 weeks, however long, and then I've got a huge benefit there, or huge advantage. But it also means that I can have those awkward discussions a lot easier, because like, look, I don't know you, you don't know me, we don't hate each other yet, so let's just have a chat about things. But that's the kind of thing I'm going to talk about, third-party governance and just the discussions around it.
It's always a fascinating topic, so I look forward to that. And Léonie?
So I'm going to be talking about the fact that there is more to performance than meets the eye, about the impact that using a screen reader has on performance and time to interaction, how the different process models in browsers has an impact on that, because there's an incredibly symbiotic relationship between screen readers and browsers. And then looking at some of the potential solutions, pitfalls, and possible ways of moving things forward so we can take accessibility into account when we do think about time to first interaction.
Very cool indeed. Awesome. I think we've covered all the key topics we wanted to talk about. So thank you very much for that. Joe, have we got any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do. We have got a few questions. Let me just pop them up. So here we go. Do you want to read them out, Simon? And then...
Yes. What's the take on providing both high and low fidelity experiences depending on the device or network, e.g. with the new network information API? That's from Bart. Has anyone done a different experience based on network information yet? Tobias is nodding his head.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we did. So we consider stuff like shipping different versions of JavaScript, so different bundles that we've built with Webpack, depending on the network latency. The experience is mixed. While the performance KPIs are actually improving, because clearly you're optimizing for a specific subgroup of your target audience, it doesn't necessarily mean that the user experience benefits in the long run. At least that's my opinion on this, because you do ship different user experiences, and when people switch devices, they kind of expect things to work the same way. If you have customized the bundles for them and changed the behavior of the site, of the app, then this confuses people. So targeting essential assets like JavaScript functionality can be hard. Optimizing images, on the other hand, for network latency is very interesting, because at the end of the day, you're shipping the same image. It just hopefully doesn't look too crappy on one on the other. But I wouldn't change core functionality of a site depending on network conditions.
If you don't mind me following that up really quickly, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the problems we had with responsive design, right, was we've been designing for desktops, and every time we go from 800 by 600 to 1024 to 1280. We were like, oh, we're like so much more room. Let's stick this sidebar on. Let's do this. Then when we had the shift to mobile first, it was like, oh, goodness, like all this stuff we've been putting on there just to fill the space. And it was quite a big paradigm shift. And I don't think it'll be identical, but I do worry that if we've all of a sudden got this, oh, here's the slow device design and here's the fast device design, you're gonna doubling up engineering overhead. You're going to be potentially solving problems that don't exist. So my usual advice to clients is, look, make your site fast in the slowest possible conditions, and everything else is free. Like, set yourself really aggressive benchmarks and sort of budgets. If you can achieve that with the site as its normal version is, then everything else comes for free. However, also to echo your point, is that completely things like images is a really obvious candidate. Like let's send low, especially with something like Trivago, right? You've got a list of search results. Let's send low-res thumbnails down if we know they're on a slow device. If there's an image gallery, maybe only send the first image down and then make the user opt into getting the rest of the image gallery. Like, hey, we know you're on a slow network. Tap here to download the rest of the images. Subtle optimizations like that, I think, would be really valuable. But I just worry that, people are going to start thinking, here's fast design.psd and slow design.psd.
I really like that notion because it taps into the whole sort of, progressive enhancement idea. You're not fundamentally changing anything, but you are just tweaking the experience based on more or less network capability or other conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
Show what you've got.
Yeah, we have had a little bit of experience with this as well. And Brian, we've got a number of different brands that span different age ranges. So we've obviously got quite a difference between some of the younger brands who are focusing on, 25 to 40, and then older brands who can be focusing more on the 55 to 65. So we have investigated and analysed to understand how it is impacted, how web performance is impacted by age range and device type as well.
That's fascinating. I hope you publish that research.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about it. Because the impact of age on perceived performance is something that has been discussed many times, but I've never seen any research to back up anyone's assumptions. So to answer Bart's question, don't change the whole experience, but do what you can with bandwidth intensive things like images.
Cool. I'll drink to that.
Awesome. Thank you for the question, Bart. Joe, have we got another one?
We do. I wonder, is everyone okay for time? All our presenters?
All good.
Sure.
Yeah, all good.
Amazing. Thank you. All right, here we go. So we've got one from Boris.
Since web performance is one of the rare fields that allows the business and technical people to interact, do you think that it should ethically be a platform for other topics related to quality, such as accessibility, standards compliance, security, etc.? From Boris. Oh, that's a big question.
That is a huge question. Well, I mean, I think performance is a subset of accessibility anyway. When you think of accessibility for what it is, it's access to content. I think performance actually falls inside of accessibility. I think accessibility is the biggest, most important thing to focus on. Performance, to my mind, is it's merely a subset of that. I'll let someone else tackle the harder parts of this question.
I think the short answer is all of those things need a pretty strong working relationship between the two sides of any organization. Most of the problems we encounter, certainly in accessibility, and having worked on the web for the better part of 2 decades, I think in a lot of other areas of technology, happen because we've got things happening in isolation. So the more designers can talk to interaction designers, can talk to developers, the more business can talk to the practitioner teams, the more marketing can talk to the business analysts, the more we can talk to each other, the better the experience for the target audience becomes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if web performance is our channel to start opening up.
Yeah.
I think web performance is kind of a vehicle for all of this as well. So it can be, in our particular instance, the starting point for bringing together a number of different areas, but that then just gives you the inroad for a number of other areas to every combined working group.
Yeah. I think when you link it all together, Jeremy Keith speaks a lot about resilient websites. Resilience is a huge part of performance. If you want a fast website, one good way of achieving at least that in part is to get rid of all the tracking scripts, right? Getting rid of tracking script is only a good thing ethically. So I think there's, I don't know what shape the Venn diagram would be, but somewhere in the middle of it all, resilience and performance is kind of a core thing for a lot of other things you want to achieve. But it is just such, as you can see in that question alone, it's such a wide range of topics. I don't know how you could summarize that.
Yeah, web performance can be used as a bigger topic to include lots of other things, which is kind of perfect because that's what we're trying to do at DeltaV. So everyone who's joined the panel, thank you very much, because it's shown us how diverse this topic is. And you start talking about site speed, then you get off into accessibility and standards and business communications. And it's just fascinating to be a part of this growing industry, which I think can only go up in its responsibilities on the web.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time all. I really do appreciate it. See you all in May, and to our attendees, hopefully see you at DeltaV in May as well to learn even more from these incredible folks. So thank you for now.
See you there.
Yeah, hey, no, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.